Thanks for joining us with CBN News Today. I'm Charlene Israel.
And I'm Ephraim Graham. Ukraine has declared a day of national mourning after 25 people were killed in the latest violence to hit the country. Thousands of security forces continue their crackdown as protesters dig in for another day of confrontation. George Thomas has more from the region.
Across Ukraine, the stunning images from the capital city of violence never seen since the days of independence more than 20 years ago. As many here worried about a bloody civil war. Overnight, large sections of the protest camp in the heart of Kiev was on fire.
I think that today, after all this, people will rise up for real.
Some 10,000 government forces surrounded the demonstrators, eventually moving in and seizing control of a third of Independence Square.
It is really scary. We can't understand how the government can hate their people so much. But on the other hand, it is not scary here, because when you come to Independence Square, it is obvious that people are united, and they are staying until the end.
Throughout the night, anti-government demonstrators battled with stones and Molotov cocktails against police armed with stun grenades, rubber bullets and water cannons. Today, protesters are back on the square, digging in for another day of confrontation.
This is the last war, the last chance for us. If we leave now, everything will be broken.
The crisis began last November when Ukraine's president rejected a trade deal with the European Union. The protesters want closer ties with Europe. The president wants to side with Putin.
I think Putin would love to have Ukraine under his leadership.
Steve Weber leads CBN's office in Ukraine. He says from Kremlin's perspective, Russia has no borders.
There is a union between Kazakhstan and Belarus and Russia, kind of an economic consolidation, but he wants Ukraine in that.
Ukraine gained its independence from the former Soviet Union back in 1991, and ever since then this nation has been searching for its true identity. In fact, half the country is evenly split. The east side is pro-Russian, the west side pro-European, and this crisis has only deepened those divisions.
Meanwhile, churches across denominations have been actively involved, seizing the opportunity to speak truth and hope into the political crisis. They've held 24-hour prayer vigils and conducted numerous evangelistic outreaches.
We are not embarrassed to name the name of God, not embarrassed to name the name of Jesus Christ. We've got placards down there on Maidan of saying, pray to Jesus. Jesus has the future for our nation.
This morning on Facebook, Weber called people around the world to pray for Ukraine.
We just need to pray that there will be a whole new generation of people who really want to serve and be leaders in the government, not for personal benefit, but for the good of the people.
George Thomas, CBN News.
The civil war in Syria is posing a growing threat to U.S. national security, and it's forcing the Obama administration to reevaluate its strategy. Al-Qaeda-linked militants are working their way into the rebel forces and pushing out moderates. Officials say that could lead to potential terrorist bases to plot and carry out attacks against the U.S. President Obama has avoided U.S. involvement in Syria so far, but now the White House says it's examining alternative options, including drone strikes on rebel factions who might later try to attack the U.S.
Thousands of Venezuelans are continuing their week-long protest against the government after the arrest of opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez yesterday. Lopez is due in court today on charges of inciting violence that erupted during protests. Human rights groups condemn the charges against Lopez as, quote, political conspiracy theories and not criminal evidence. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry warned arresting the opposition leader would have a chilling effect on freedom of expression. Venezuelans are protesting rising crime, soaring inflation, and food shortages.
Anti-government protesters clashed with police in Thailand. In Thailand on Tuesday, one person was killed and dozens were injured as police rounded up demonstrators who'd camped out at various locations throughout Bangkok. Police fired tear gas and used batons to beat people. Since late last year, protesters have blocked access to businesses and government buildings, demanding that their Prime Minister Shinawatra resign. The political unrest is expected to continue as Thais await a court ruling on the legality of the recent federal election.
Back here at home, the president's push to increase the minimum wage could cost the country about 500,000 jobs by the year 2016. That analysis comes from the latest Congressional Budget Office report. The CBO is a nonpartisan congressional body, but its study has Democrats on the defensive. The party has been pushing for a gradual increase in the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour by 2016. Republicans have long opposed the minimum wage boost, calling it a job killer.
There appears to be a huge disconnect between what the president is saying about the economy and what Americans are experiencing. That divide surfaced again this week as the Obama administration praised the 2009 stimulus, also known as the Recovery Act. Heather Sells reports.
The Obama administration is celebrating the 5-year anniversary of its 2009 stimulus program. A self-congratulatory report out this week explains considerable evidence suggests the federal government's efforts to jumpstart the economy were successful. Businesses and households are now in far better shape as a result. But ironically, also out this week, a new Gallup poll in which Americans say their biggest concern is jobs and unemployment. 25% of Democrats and Republicans agree it's the biggest problem. Their second biggest concern, the economy.
And so I think the American people are a little bit ahead of the president on this one, and they're worried.
Forbes contributor and venture capitalist Bill Frezza says jobs and the economy should be the biggest concern for Americans.
Look at all their neighbors that are out of work. Look at the fact that take-home pay is declining in America. Look at the fact that there's an enormous amount of uncertainty on the horizon in terms of where they're going to get their health care and what it's going to cost. Their employees are nervous as well. So with everybody nervous, it's hard for the average American to be sanguine about the economy and believe any of the numbers coming out of Washington.
Last fall, during the government shutdown, Gallup showed that Americans were most worried about the government and politicians. But before that, going back to February 2008, Americans have said that either jobs or the economy were the most important problems. This consistent worry is, of course, unlikely to be eased by the president's latest report, and there's already talk that the GOP plans to use economy concerns as a major midterm election weapon. Heather Sells, CBN News.
The Department of Homeland Security wants to be able to track cars across America using license plate numbers. DHS is trying to create a massive national license plate recognition database. The agency has proposed hiring a private company to collect the data from existing commercial and law enforcement tracking devices. WTOP Radio reports the government wants to use the database to hunt down immigration violators. But critics worry the database could also be used to monitor the movements of private Americans who don't have any record of criminal activity.
An Australian missionary is in police custody in North Korea. Officials detained 75-year-old John Short for allegedly handing out Christian literature. Short owns a Christian bookstore in Hong Kong and traveled to Pyongyang with a tour group from Beijing. His wife told the French press agency that North Korean officers took him from his hotel early Monday morning. Religious activity is forbidden in Korea, and foreigners are routinely detained and arrested. American missionary Kenneth Bay is currently serving a 15-year sentence.
The Church of England will not give its blessings to people in same-sex marriages, even after they become legal in the United Kingdom next month. Church bishops say clergy can offer an informal prayer if a couple asks for it. The bishop also says people in gay marriage should not be ordained, and that people who are already ordained should not marry someone of the same sex.
Coming up, they call it Friday Night Tykes, the reality show where 8- and 9-year-old football players are pushed to win at all costs. Even the NFL calls it disturbing.
A New Mexico judge says terminally ill patients can choose to end their lives with a doctor's help. That is the ruling of Judge Nan Nash. It means physicians can legally prescribe lethal doses of medicines to dying patients. Judge Nash wrote, "This court cannot envision a right more fundamental, more private, or more integral to the liberty, safety, and happiness of a New Mexican than the right of a competent terminally ill patient to choose aid in dying." Oregon, Washington, Vermont, Montana, and Hawaii all allow physician-assisted suicide.
A former nurse at a Planned Parenthood facility in Indianapolis is speaking out, calling it evil. Marianne Anderson worked at Indiana's largest abortion provider. Speaking to the Criterion newspaper of the Catholic Archdiocese of Indianapolis, she says she was on the fence about abortion when she first started working there, but became uneasy when people from the National Planned Parenthood office visited. She says they had a chant saying abortion all the time. Anderson describes it as a money-grubbing, evil, very sad, sad place to work. You can find the link to the interview on cbnnews.com.
A new reality show called Friday Night Tykes is generating controversy. The show follows a youth football league in Texas where 8- and 9-year-old children play tackle football. The program airs on the brand new Esquire cable channel. The kids are coached by often overzealous parents who berate, push, and even encourage aggression and violence on the field. The National Football League has denounced the program, calling it disturbing. Many health professionals say it is neither healthy, either physically or psychologically, for children involved.
Joining us now with more on this is family therapist and author Dr. Linda Mental. Linda, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for
First
having
of all, these kids in Friday Night Tykes are actually 8 and 9 years old. Are they a bit too young to be playing a physical contact sport like football?
Well, the big thing to think about with football, like a lot of contact sports, is the propensity towards concussion. When kids get hit, even though you have a helmet on, and this is what surprises parents, a helmet doesn't protect you from concussion. It helps protect the skull, but not from concussion. So these kids are just as much at risk for that, plus a lot of broken bones because of that too, especially when they're encouraging, which they are on the show, kids to hit them hard, hit them in the head, which not even the NFL does, and then hit their legs. And so we're seeing kids with concussions and broken bones, and that's dangerous.
Unbelievable. It's a little disturbing, actually, to see how intense some of the parents are forcing their kids to play. Do they really, what are some of the consequences for forcing the kids to, and being so hard on them?
I know, and one of the quotes I heard on one of the episode 2, I think it was, where the mom said, when the kids look bad, I look bad. And I'm thinking, this is so backwards. This is not about you as a parent. So putting that kind of pressure, when you force your child to play, and a lot of these kids, when they're interviewed, say they don't really want to play, but their parents are making them play at that level. And then what happens is the kids begin to build up a resentment. Later on, they might rebel because of that, and they just lose the enjoyment of doing something that should be enjoyable and should be building cooperation and all the good things we know that sports can do for children.
And is this unhealthy for them parents to put this type of pressure on the kids?
I really think it is, because it's really more about what your dream is as a parent. And I know I'm a dance mom, and so I know how that goes when you want your child to do the very best. But when you break that sort of that line of it's more about me and what I'm doing versus what that child needs, and if the child is actually having fun on this, then it does create a lot of tension in the parent-child bond as well.
Wow. What are the psychological consequences of being cursed at and being taught aggression at such a young age?
See, this is the thing that just blows my mind on this. So if you had somebody in a classroom, if you had a teacher cursing a child, humiliating a child, embarrassing a child, and this is what happens regularly on the show, you would call that person a bully. If it was a parent who was doing that in a family, you would say that that child was being emotionally abused. And so all the things that we see with bullying and emotional abuse are also potential problems for these kids. Problems with self-esteem, being anxious, feeling like they have to perform at a high level all the time, and worrying that they're failing and they're not meeting expectations, brings depression, anxiety, in some severe cases, suicidal thoughts. So it's not a good thing to be doing what they're doing to these kids.
And it's reality TV, which means it happens in real life.
And I'm saying time out in the sporting event and rethink what you're doing to kids that are so young. One neuroscientist says that they shouldn't even be doing this before the age of 14 because of the impact on the body. So they really need to rethink if this is a good idea.
Well, Dr. Linda Mental, as always, your advice and your help is priceless.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Up next, a family is torn apart after a dad failed to use his turn signal. The immigration debate hits home.
Welcome back. Behind the scenes of the immigration debate are the faces of real people, including children who've lost their parents because they've been deported.
Heather Sells traveled to Miami to learn more about these children who are facing life literally alone.
Yo creo que casi todos los meses I think almost every month we have a family that's facing the deportation of a family member.
Pastor Obed Aregi finds himself working in continual crisis mode. His congregation is full of children and parents who fear deportation and its consequences.
I have seen kids literally get sick, their immune system shutting down and getting illnesses they had never seen before. I have seen kids get profoundly depressed and a lot of times end up with drug problems.
Miami is one of the centers of the deportation crisis. It's a city where many children live in fear that one or both of their parents could be deported. Kevin's nightmare came true 2 years ago when officers pulled his dad over for not using his turn signal. He spent several weeks in detention before his deportation back to El Salvador.
After he got deported, it just didn't feel the same. So my mom, I always see her sad. My brother will always look out the window waiting for him to come. And then I had a little baby sister he never met, she never knew her dad.
Chris was just 8 years old the day 2 officers knocked on his door.
My mom started crying. My dad started getting closer to me, started putting me behind him. I was too small to understand what was going on.
In fact, Chris believes the officers intended to take both his parents, but relented when they saw him, taking only his dad.
As you grow up, you start to realize you're missing a father figure. You know, you need someone to, tell you, don't do that, give you advice on stuff.
Cecia and her brother face the unimaginable, both parents deported. The high school senior lost her mom in 7th grade and her dad last fall.
It was just another shock because, they had already taken my mom, and so, I didn't really know what was going to happen.
Cecia and her brother now live with a family friend. For all these families, the pain of separation is profound, difficult to explain, and the task of reuniting can be equally challenging. Kevin's father originally planned to bring the family back to El Salvador, but decided against it after witnessing the growing gang violence there. Chris's dad tried to re-enter legally, but has struggled with illness and paperwork. Although Chris was able to visit him recently in Peru, he hopes his dad will be able to return home soon.
One of the big things I've always dreamed of is for him to come back, see me graduate high school. It's one of the big things I want him to come for.
Cecia earns top grades in her international baccalaureate program and hopes to study medicine. But she fears returning to Nicaragua, the country she left as a 1-year-old.
I would like to live life as a normal person, be able to graduate and be able to get into a college and just continue even though all this has happened.
Cecia, Kevin, and Chris are far from alone. The Obama administration has deported close to 2 million illegal immigrants, including hundreds of thousands of parents.
What I hear a lot is that people don't believe that the government is actually deporting parents and separating families, that they just can't imagine that it's happening to the extent that it is.
Advocate Wendy Cervantes says deportation is just off the radar for many unaffected by it.
It's hard to fathom because it's really so horrible and it so runs contrary to our American family values.
Her recent work documents children suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms following a parent's deportation. Other studies show a decline in physical health and education.
I think that children have been an afterthought in immigration reform, even though they're the ones who have the most at stake.
Opponents contend that children of illegal immigrants should not be used as human shields to protect parents from deportation, though there's some bipartisan movement on Capitol Hill around concern for the children. The Obama administration has stopped their deportation, and further protection could be on the way. Pastor Obed fervently prays for reform. He acknowledges that entering the country illegally is unbiblical, but he hopes compassion will lead to a fair way for families to stay.
I've asked around the congregation and the families are willing to pay anything. If the fines were $10,000, they're willing to pay it. We're talking about a family willing to work for many years to pay whatever the government asks for, as long as they do not have to go back to their home country.
In the meantime, the new normal for Kevin is life without Dad. He says sports keep him going, and the daily phone call his mom receives from his poppy.
It's not like they got divorced or anything. So it's still that hope and faith that they're going to get back together and we're all going to get back together.
Reporting in Miami, Heather Sells, CBN News.
And finally, here on CBN News Today, a three-point shot during halftime at a college basketball game is going viral.
And that's because the impeccable shot was made by a very special champion. 54-year-old Michael Quinn is a blind and mentally impaired man from Springfield, Missouri, who doesn't allow his disabilities to get the best of him. And his three-point shot during a College of the Ozarks game proved that point.
I like basketball so much. If I do my best, then everything else will be okay.
Quinn practices three-point shots using the voice of someone standing below the basket to guide him to it. He is part of Champion Athletes of the Ozarks, which helps people with disabilities participate in sports.
Like that. If I do my best, everything will be okay.
I love it. He's
Indeed.
a champion indeed.
Beautiful.
Well, that's it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
Take the time to tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do it on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Have a wonderful Wednesday, everybody.